Hey, can everybody hear me okay? Brilliant. So this morning we're going to start with stories, so it's a nice, easy start for everyone. I think the most I'm going to ask you for is to raise your hand. So if you can manage that, that's a good start. If there's not, there's a coffee machine at the back. So maybe we'll start already. Can you put your hand up if you're a product marketer? Okay, we're in the right place. It's a very good start. One of my favorite things about product marketing is that no one can seem to actually agree on what it is. So every time I do one of these sessions and I ask someone, no one can agree. And I think if I asked all of you today, which if you see me later, I might ask to do that, I'll probably get a different definition of what product marketing is and where its value lies. It's frustrating to explain. Marketing is a driving story engine of the organization. And what I mean by that is product marketing is responsible for the constant creation and relaying of valuable product stories to the market. Whenever I have this task where someone sits me down and says, can you explain what product marketing is? I always fall back to this framework. This is the product marketing wheel. And I think it does a really good job of explaining what we do with our lives. I believe our lives are always split between two different worlds. One, we have to understand the market and use that understanding and those insights to shape a valuable product, and then use those same insights to communicate that valuable product back to the market. So our lives, or my life, I always feel is this shaping and communicating and shaping. And in my experience, the best way to do both of these things is through effective storytelling.
Do I need to take pictures of the slides, or do you share the slides?
We're going to share all of the slides after, but thank you. EMA, and that's really what I'd like to prove to you in the next 30 minutes, is how key storytelling is going to grow and how important it is to product marketers. And I would like to do that by focusing on three statements. So number one, is that human beings think in stories. So the way we've evolved, that's how our brains process information. And to wake us up, we're going to do a little bit of a psychological experiment together this morning to prove that to be the case. Second statement is that stories embed value. So whenever we create a story and connect it to a campaign, a brand, a product, a feature, it becomes more valuable afterwards. And as Igor said, we're going to be looking at some business cases of great brands who recognizes and execute this every day. Third and foremost, we're going to explore that storytelling is a skill. I think a lot of people get very intimidated by storytelling, but I believe, and my experience has shown, that it's no different to user personas or messaging. It's my story. This grumpy little boy is me. I'm grumpy because my football team's lost for probably the 100th time. I'm from Newcastle in the north of England, where football is a religion. I've never worked out why, because we never win, so it's very strange. But even with that, I fell in love with sport from an early age. The moments it can create, the ability, how it can bring people together. It's the only time I've seen my father cry is at a sports game. So it just has this really amazing power, and it made me fall in love with it and want to work in that. And 30 years later, my son is following in my footsteps, but hopefully a lot happier ones than mine. My dream came true, and I got to work within the sports industry. So first at Adidas at the global headquarters, and then ASICS here in Amsterdam. And I got to basically work on creating products for some of the greatest sports events. So the FIFA World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, the London Y, everything you see here, there's a new IX information. So that's not just a great statistic for product marketers, but as you can imagine, very good when you're learning a language. That's why over 2,000 hours of Babbel's created digital content is all curated around storytelling, because they recognize the power it has, not just in memory retention, but to be able to connect to the users. As Igor said, I'm now the CMO of Arian, which is a sports tech brand. So I've managed to merge these worlds of sports and tech together, where we make movement data meaningful, which is a nice fancy product marketing way to say that we sell sports data to some of the big sports brands. And it's my first role within B2B. And this is where I got to learn how powerful storytelling can be in the B2B environment. Not just one, because it's so overcrowded and it's a great way to stand out. But also number two is it has an incredible power to make things that are incredibly complicated and boring, very simple and fun. And if you worked in B2B product marketing, making things boring and complicated, simple and fun is a lot of our lives. And I would like to show you how that's possible with a first little experiment. So coming back to that first of those three statements that I would like you to leave with today, human beings think in stories. And to prove that, I'm going to show you a 1-minute animation which was built as a scientific experiment to show the power of storytelling on the human brain. It was first created in 1940 by two psychologists, Hans and Simmel, And all you have to do, it's the easiest thing in the world, watch it. If people out there, hand up and share with me. Okay, so I know that's very nebulous for an early morning. But other than seeing simple shapes move around the screen, would anyone like to be brave enough to share anything they felt or thought or saw in those images and in that animation?
My Atari that I had as a very young kid, very long time ago, just sitting and playing that the back and forth when it was just two sticks.
So you saw them as almost movable characters as their shapes as well, yeah?
Yeah, it's just like it was playing a video game.
Exactly, yeah. Anyone else want to share?
I saw a big bully chasing around two little guys, and the two little guys teaming up to get rid of the big bully.
Brilliant. Yeah, so I'll just repeat that for anyone who didn't hear. So they saw that, I say the larger triangle as a bully chasing these two other ones. We're seeing all of these things. You saw all of those things when you basically just saw triangles and circles. And the reason for that is our brains are addicted to stories. Over thousands of years, we've come to process information as stories. And it makes sense. If you think of the written word, before we could write anything down, it was our only way to share information. So it was a survival instinct to do that. And the results of that experiment were the same, that almost everyone who watched it felt emotions, they embedded characters, they even embedded purpose and characters to simple storytelling, and how we as humans, we can see stories when they're not even there. So you can imagine how powerful it is once we actually create or curate a great story. And what I would like to do now is show you 3 examples how product marketers can use that information. I think it's summarized best by one of my favorite authors, Yuval Noah Harari, who's the writer of Sapiens and Homo Deus. He's like a master of understanding humans as an individual, but also as the collective. And he wrote that humans think in stories, and we try to make sense of the world by telling stories. And so if you talk to anyone else at the conference today, it's more often than not, there's some form of storytelling, or how you got the train and how you got here, what happened last night. There's some form of storytelling there. And that's why it makes it the perfect weapon for product marketing messaging. I don't know about you, but when I check my inbox now, I don't get emails from Miro or Skype or Uber anymore. I get emails from Jessica from Uber or Danielle from Miro. It's gone into this personal world. And once you open the email, the tone of voice, everything's built around it. And it makes perfect sense. The truth is, we like to talk to each other in stories, then why shouldn't brands speak to us the same way? And you can see some great examples of brands that do that each and every day. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the science of storytelling, which I love. You might not have noticed it while you were watching that animation, but your brain was releasing all kinds of different chemicals. In parts where you saw the bully creating like a tense environment, your brain was releasing cortisol, and cortisol allows you to focus within those tense moments. When you're feeling a little bit of happiness, once the heroes got away from the bully, you're feeling an emotion, your body's releasing oxytocin, and that's what creates an emotional connection to a character. So connection and focus, and those are 2 very important things to product marketers. Each other's emotions. So we understand something like neural coupling as product marketers. It allows us to create much better promotions that give us the desired effect. Let's look at another example. Has anyone during LinkedIn see this done the rounds several times? This was very popular, but I think for a reason why is that it does one of my favorite things, powers that storytelling has, is that it makes something extremely messy very simple. And we've all been in this situation where you've got to deliver a presentation, and you could do it as either 30 minutes or in an Excel, but if you can just get one great line, it can do it straight away. And it's never been more important than now. On average, all of us in this room are bombarded with around 100,000 digital words every day. And so what that does is our window for focus and for connection has never been shorter. So it means people like us have to recognize that and be able to communicate information as quickly and as exciting as possible. I had this experience recently in doing something I'd never done before. That's why it's so good for adoption. And the example I'll give you is something that I had to purchase and adopt, which was a baby bed. I had 0 experience in this. I didn't know any brands. I didn't know what makes a good baby bed. I didn't know what the good features are. And during that research, I came across this with the tagline, "The baby bed that grows with your baby." And in 4 simple images and 1 simple tagline, like, I got it. Of not just showing the product as an IKEA cuddler. Because of that, that's why I'd be used by marketers. Help me out here, I'm going to show
was the most powerful tool of all. To do this, He went online and bought 200 objects from eBay and thrift stores. The average price of these objects was $1 each. He then called 200 authors and asked them if they wanted to be part of the significant object study, asking them to each craft interesting personal stories about one of the objects, like where they came from, who had owned them, and other interesting facts. He was then ready. He had 200 objects and 200 stories. He posted them for sale on eBay again, the same 200 objects, but this time with their stories. He wanted to know if there would be any change and how buyers would react. The result? 200 used thrift store thingamajigs, bought for $1 or $2 each and costing $129 total, were sold on eBay for a total of $8,000. Quite remarkable, isn't it?
So let me do a quick recap. So 2 journalists in New York wanted to prove the power of storytelling. They went to a thrift shop and bought 200 items, all between $1 and $2, so basically junk. They asked 200 authors to create a short story, and then they connected them and put them on eBay. And the result is that they turned $121 into $8,000. So it's an incredible demonstration of how just adding a story increased the value of something that was almost valueless. And you can see some of those objects on screen now. This is from significantobjects.com. I would really encourage you, if you want to do a little experiment with your product marketing teams on storytelling, they list every single one. Already recognize a character, a pink rabbit, buy a battery. It's the most important feature. So this is why they were able to recognize how powerful in product marketing storytelling can be to highlighting a feature. And the more focused you are on one feature, the more important it is. And that's why still both of these brands spend hundreds of millions fighting over something as silly as a little pink bunny. Let's look at another example, a little bit more niche, and getting away from the product a bit, because we're not just involved in product creation, we're involved in the delivery. And one brand that I think does this brilliantly is Oatly. Now, if you're like me, your LinkedIn's probably full of business cases and case studies of how great Oatly's doing, and it's true. They're really a great example of how guerrilla marketing and how much they understand their own brand, and they're really courageous with their marketing. And they do it everywhere. It's not just on their campaigns, and it's a great example of something I think product marketers take for granted, which is packaging. We don't often see it as a really great way to highlight our product. And that's why storytelling here can be such a perfect part of the wheel, which is differentiation or product differentiation. Every time I go to the supermarket, I learn that they found a way to make milk out of something I didn't know was possible before. I thought it was just cows, and there was almonds, and then there was oats, and then every time there's 7 more. So there's never been more important when you go now to see 100 different things on the shelf, the brand that can do it. And once, just like the baby bed example, it's in 5 seconds that you can get it. So if you want some more good examples of a brand that really understands who they are, and we'll get onto why that's important, a really important part of storytelling is not understanding your audience, but understanding yourself. Oatly is a great example of that. So let's get even a little bit of bug fix or Japanese or French digital touch points. Loves fancy restaurants. I'm from England. We not really known for our love of food or our knowledge of food. So it's always quite lost on me. So she takes me to these really fancy places where they bring you a plate and there's kind of like some wet mushrooms on there, a little bit of green foam, like a biscuity type thing. And it looks like something fell off the plate on the way to the table. And she loves it and I'm just lost. But then there's that point where either the waiter or the chef comes to the table and they tell you, these aren't mushrooms, they were foraged in my back garden, and this foam took 3 days to make, and this biscuit was handed down from generation from my grandma. And they tell you the story of the food. And you're still hungry afterwards, or I am, but at least you start to see the value in what they created. And that's really what it's all about. By the end, do you see the value in what the person's telling you? And I think storytelling is the best way to do that. Okay. Quick summary. So we've gone through communicating and shaping with storytelling. So hopefully by now we're starting to see the value of storytelling. So the next question is, how do we do it? And this is where I truly believe storytelling is a skill. I think a lot of people get intimidated by storytelling because there's a lot of words like a talented or a natural storyteller. But in my experience, it's no different to all of the things that are on your table now, from positioning and messaging, get that word right, all of these different things that you see, they just take frameworks, they take education, they take practice, and they take experience. And I think that's what you can do to learn stories. What's your experience times at ASICS, and all of their knowledge to how they became great storytellers. And the result was this. I was able to acquire so much great frameworks and things that we can use, not just advice, but things that product marketers can use day in and day out with their teams. And what I would love to do, just to finish my session here, is share with you 3 of these frameworks that I've come to understand that if you combine them together in sequence, can be fantastic to understand and turn your product marketing teams into story engines. So the first one is the story wheel. So if any of you have ever studied anything about storytelling, it's probably this, is that most stories follow a very similar structure. So this all comes down to a very famous book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, which was written by Joseph Campbell, who basically studied as many books and stories as possible from different cultures, different ages, and basically realized that once you put them all together, like Harry Potter, to something more intimidating than your competitors, it could be a feature. It doesn't matter. The point is it allows us to stop ideating and experimenting, and that's what product marketers do best. Number 2 is the defined delivery. So there are thousands of stories that you're told every day, but probably only a small percentage of them actually work and connect with you. And the reason for that is twofold. I think you need 2 things to deliver a great story. 1, you need a very good understanding of your audience, and 2, you need a very good understanding of yourself as a storyteller. Now, the first thing should be easy. As product marketers, we should know our audience, and we already have great frameworks to do that, like user personas. Where I believe we fall down is that we don't often understand who we are and what makes us different, what makes us special, what makes us unique in a very crowded marketplace. And that's where the brand archetype wheel can be so fantastic. So basically stating that we only exist within these 12 archetypes within the minds of our consumers. So the more that we recognize where we occupy on the wheel, where our competitors occupy on the wheel, what is the emotion we're trying to create, and what is our category, it allows us to have a better understanding of ourselves. And if you combine that with your unique word resonate, and I think using that helps us to create much more meaningful things. But this is also a great one. This is a Japanese philosophy framework called Ikigai, where it does the same thing, but it allows you to take the time with your teams to focus on your passion, your mission, your vocation, and your profession. So to understand a little bit more about yourself, what makes you different, and in doing so, you're going to be able to ensure that your story is much more connected with meaning, and then it's going to resonate, which means hopefully it will be successful. I've combined all of this. I've just met Gina from Miro before. Very happy to say this is in the Miroverse, so you can take this with you. It's open and free, so if you want to experiment with your teams, you can download it and basically plot it out. So build your 2 guardrails to understand who you are, define your delivery to understand who your audience is, and then define some protagonists and start plotting. So go across this wheel. And it's a great thing you can do with your team. It doesn't mean by the end of the session, you're gonna have a perfect story, but it means you can also have a better understanding of how to tell a story. And also, I guarantee you're gonna have some great examples. And before I leave you guys, what I wanted to leave you with is my definition that's worked with me in the past to define our value as product marketing, and is that we are the story engine of the organization, is that we're constantly tasked with the creation and relaying of great product stories. To sell you on that, I told you that we think in stories, and because of that, the best way to communicate is through storytelling. Second, I showed you some great examples of significant objects where these journalists prove that storytelling embeds value. And because of that, I think the best way to shape a valuable product is with effective storytelling. But this is just my definition that has worked well with my teams in the past. And the whole point of Misunderstood and the whole point, I think, of the Product Marketing Alliance is for us to all to come together and share our insights, our experience, so we keep learning more. And that's what I would love to do today. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you a little better, and I hope you can share some of the stories you've worked on, share your definition as well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elliot. We're going to do a few minutes of questions. So,
You A/B. What are we trying to do? Well, we're in a very crowded market. There's a lot of dads in that market who know nothing about beds. We need to speak to them within 5 seconds about why this is a good purchase. So they really understood that. And so if that is what you're doing, that's the way to test it. So if you're able to test, can we show this to 50 people for only 4 or 5 seconds? And are they afterwards be able to maybe even repeat our tagline, the bed that grows you? If not, then it's not working. You have to go back to the drawing board. But so many of the things that we use to test, it applies exactly the same to storytelling. But the other way is, like I said, go back to your wheel and put it through, and maybe you've missed a part of it, and you can see, and you'll soon start to learn what works with your target audience.
We'll connect this to how do you make your story resonate with internal stakeholders, sales resistance, product development, etc.
Well, this should be the same thing, because this is the thing, everyone enjoys a story, so even internally. So I actually think one thing we can learn from storytelling is even allowing product marketers to get better at influencing. So at the very big part of that wheel, which is the 12 steps, there's another way to look at it, which is order, chaos, order. So a hero, whether it be Harry Potter or Neo from the Matrix, they're in an ordinary world, they have conflict, and then they return a little bit different. And that is the most basic way you can boil down storytelling, is that order, chaos, order. And I tell some of my team when they need to get something signed off, it sounds so small, and it really helps us on storytelling that we use all the time like that.
Do you create different stories for different personas?
Absolutely. That's part of that wheel, is defining the protagonist. And the way you define it, I would start by doing an individual story. Now, we don't often have that luxury. We don't have 4 campaign resources at some of our brands, or at least I've worked at places where I don't have that. But if you create their individual stories, you're probably going to work out where the connections are and how you can build one story together. And that's what really great brands do, is if you watch a great commercial, they find a way to talk to all of their individual protagonists, but it doesn't feel split, it's all one story. But it needs to start from giving care and attention to each of those individual protagonists. What's their individual story that works best for them? And then later on you can work out, well, this looks like we have 2 very distinct stories, or we find one to combine.
We're going to do one more, and that is, before you build the story, existing customers already have a story about you in their head. How do you start to move them to the new narrative?
Yeah, that's really difficult. I mean, that's really a brand marketing question, and sometimes it's always easier to start with a clean slate. But I actually have a good example of this is ASICS. So ASICS have occupied in the sports industry the same part of the brand marketing wheel, brand archetype wheel, which is the hero. And that's why every single Nike and Adidas commercial you've heard for the last 20, 30 years has been, you're the best, you can do it, no one's better, keep going, harder, stronger, faster. And we used to do a challenge where put a Nike, Adidas or ASICS advert on screen, take away the logos and try and have someone guess and no one can do it because they're saying the exact same thing. If you look now to any of ASICS marketing, they've made a complete shift to what they call the caregiver, which is a health program.
The framework will be the same.
A DMA is host a beta.
Purchase decision maker, how do you tackle and where would you focus the story on?
Yeah, it always depends on, you probably have the same experience as me, that changes between companies because in some companies the decision maker is more important and sometimes it's the influencer. So I would change it, but I would deliver to both. But once again, it's 2 different protagonists of a story. One story might not. So I said that understanding your audience, the best you can understand is what makes this guy's life difficult as the end consumer or as the purchaser. What makes them different? And if you really understand them, you understand how to talk to them and you can decide the story. So more often, it could be the exact same story that you're pitching, but one thing different. But the best idea is you're putting them as the hero of that story, and the more you understand them, the more you can make. But the best way to do that is by experimenting. You guys know your audience, your target audience, who you're doing. So the more you understand that, apply that to storytelling, and you're going to end up in a better place.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.